It's Thursday afternoon, so you know what that means. It's your favorite music review show, What's in Your Walkman, with Marley and Jay. So Marley, what's in your Walkman this week?
Well, Jay, this week I've been listening to the Tic Disorders. And I just can't get enough of their breakthrough album, Tourette's Disorder.
Going a little more obscure this week. All right, so let's get into it. What's the standout track for you and why?
For me, it's gotta be What is a Tic? It's, really the defining song of the album Tourette's, and dare I say, the Tic Disorders' entire discography.
For sure. And what would you say What is a Tic is all about?
Jay, I am so glad you asked. A tic is a sudden, repetitive, irregular, and unrhythmic motor movement involving specific muscle groups and vocalizations. Examples would include repetitive blinking and head shaking, shrugging and muscle tensing, grimacing, grunts, barking, or clicking sounds. And these are just a few of perhaps more common examples, as tics vary widely among individuals and can wax and wane over time. But to break it down even further, a simple tic involves a single movement and one or more group of muscles, while a complex tic is a combination of simple tics performed together. In more severe cases, involuntary words are shouted or forcefully delivered and can often be inappropriate for the situation or completely taboo. Do you have a favorite track off this album?
I do, in fact. It's the song that leads into your fave. You know the one just before, Premonitory Sensation.
Oh yeah, that's an interesting one. What's your take on it?
First, it's a really powerful lead-up and intro into what is a tic. Premonitory sensation is about the localized pressure to perform a tic, often felt preceding a tic. Usually, the tic expression alleviates this pressure. However, there's some controversy on that bit, but we can get into that later. Either way, the premonitory sensation can become quite uncomfortable for the individual experiencing it.
Man, sounds like it could really have an effect on an individual's quality of life. Another great pick. What about the other songs?
Well, we've got the development, risk factors, and co-occurring disorders.
So many bangers.
All right, let's get into it. The development gets us into how the age of onset is commonly between 6 and 7 years old, and initial presentations usually involve simple motor tics. What's really interesting is that tics can wax and wane or change over time, typically peaking in adolescence and decreasing in severity and frequency over time, which sometimes disappears entirely, but not always. And then we've got risk factors, which loops us in on the relationship between tics and stress and anxiety.
Right? Yeah, those pesky psychological and environmental factors, whether it's going back to school after summer break or hanging out in a social setting or holidays and birthdays or just watching TV alone, really. There's a lot that can exacerbate the frequency of tics and cause functional consequences like chronic heightened motor activation and elevated muscle tension and feelings of frustration and anxiety, which are all maintaining factors of tics.
And you gotta get grooving with those comorbidity assessments, because man, are they prevalent with tics. OCD, ADHD, things can get pretty complicated.
I hear ya. Do you have any thoughts on the band themselves?
Oh, you mean like the band members? Well, they wouldn't be the Tic Disorders without their lead, their frontman and the soul of the group, Criterion A, the presence of motor and vocal tics.
Well, I hate splitting hairs, but that's just for the Tourette's album, right?
You're right. It would be a disservice not to mention the Tic Disorders' other albums, as that primary criteria changes for persistent chronic motor or vocal tic disorder and provisional tic disorder. And we can't forget the band's other members here. Criteria B, persistence of tics for over a year. Criteria C, onset before age 18. And criteria D, not due to substances or medical conditions. What do you think?
Well, to me, they're a big deal in the genre of neurodevelopmental disorders, though they share that classification with some other pretty important acts like ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, and intellectual disability. Not that we're picking favorites.
Of course. How about those album sales, though?
Yeah, the last I read, the numbers were a little bit confusing, but overall, we know that the Tic Disorders have sold at least 1.4 million records in the United States alone. But we know it's probably a lot more, though, as a lot of records are being sold under the table these days. And, I hear most of these sales are actually going to boys versus girls at a rate of 2-to-1 or even 4-to-1.
That's some pretty heavy stuff, Marley. Well, that's all the time we have for What's in Your Walkman. You're listening to Kpsy 98.21 The Psy. We've been your hosts, Marley and Jay. Remember to keep those Walkmans rolling, folks. The Psy will be right back after a word from our sponsors.
Sometimes life's hiccups are more than just hiccups. Tic disorders can make one feel isolated, out of place. But what if there's a way to turn things around without any medication? Introducing Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. With CBT, understanding and coping with tics becomes a journey of self-discovery and empowerment. Asterisk, 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 while CBT does not claim to be a complete cure, many individuals notice a significant reduction in tic severity and improved coping mechanisms. Tick to the beat of your own drum. Ask your health professional if cognitive behavioral therapy is right for you.
Welcome back. You're listening to Kpsy 98.21 The Psy. We've got MDove and Junior.
Oh, yeah.
Here with your sports ball predictions.
MDove, I'm so excited for this week's big game. We've got the Tourette's versus the treatment. Now, how are the treatment going to approach this pivotal matchup?
I hear you, Junior. This is going to be one for the record books. Speaking of records, how about the Tourette's record this season? They are undefeated. There's currently no cure for Tourette's or tic disorders and no way to completely eliminate the presence of tics.
That's right. They use that formidable functional impairment playbook. Hard-hitting stuff there. Because tics are externally manifested, Tourette's disorder can significantly impact an individual's daily life and functioning, often leading to social, physical, and emotional challenges.
You're the treatment, and you got to address that.
Absolutely.
I mean, at the very least, the treatment is going to have to play defense, get a reduction on that intensity and frequency of tics.
All right, so let's talk strategies. The treatment needs to shut down or at least slow down their opponent. And if we're talking common strategies, then you got to mention medication.
Medication, right. Studies on antipsychotics and other medications have shown to help, but this is disputed, as there are some studies saying that the strategy isn't enough on its own to make a real impact.
Okay, fair enough. What about brain stimulation?
Brain stimulation. Now, that's a tough one to pull off. You really don't see it often. It might be worth looking into, but more research is definitely needed.
Then that leaves us with therapy, the meat and potatoes of the treatment strategies.
If we're talking therapies, the treatment is going to have to rely heavily on the CBT approach.
Good old cognitive behavioral therapy, a classic. Now, MDove, what makes CBT so effective?
Well, unlike other treatment approaches that might try to focus on the root causes of why a symptom or disorder is present, CBT cuts through all that and goes straight for the behavior itself.
Now, that's something that's going to be especially helpful against the tic disorders. You don't really need to find out why the tics are happening. You just need to reduce the frequency and intensity of the tics. And while we're talking about CBT, it's important to call out an offshoot of CBT specifically created to use against tic disorders. I'm talking, of course, about comprehensive behavioral intervention treatment, or CBIT for short.
That's right. And CBIT works specifically by creating a treatment plan, then providing psychoeducation about the individual's tic disorder, helping the individual consciously identify what it feels like for them to tic, and the physical sensations that lead up to the tic, teaching them specific behavioral techniques or interventions to replace the tic behavior, and finally, practice to utilize these skills in real-life settings.
Well said, MDove. But let's not forget about the other treatment strategies that have shown effectiveness against the tic disorders as well. We've got mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, exposure with response prevention, and habit reversal training.
All viable strategies for the upcoming game.
Absolutely. So final word. What's the outcome of the match going to be this week?
If we're placing bets, I'm going CBIT approach in HRT interventions. Sprinkle in some antipsychotics if it's really needed, and that's going to give the treatment plan a real chance.
Well, you heard it here first on the Psy Sports Ball Review. I'm Junior.
And I'm MDove, signing off.
Good night, folks.